Hello and welcome to the Following Truth Bible Study. I'm your host LJ, and in this episode we're going to be looking at which KJV is correct. Something that I see often used against those that proclaim themselves to be KJV only, or at least proclaim that the KJV is the only correct English version that should be used, is which KJV are you referring to? Is it the 1611, the 1629, the 1638, 1762, or 1769 version? Which print is it? Is it the Oxford or is it the Cambridge? James White stated in his book, The KJV Only Controversy, the KJV that is carried by the average KJV advocate today looks very different than the edition that came off the press of Robert Barker in 1611, page 78. Does it, Mr. White? Does it really? You might like to try and make it out to be so, but that doesn't in fact make it truth. When I am confronted with this argument, I immediately know that the person using this argument has probably not studied it in any great detail for themselves, and they are almost certainly just regurgitating as fact something that they have heard or read by somebody else, and that they have not actually bothered to fact check the facts that they are stating. Now, I know that they have not checked these facts because if they had, they wouldn't be using the argument. The KJV has never been revised. This is a fact, whether the person saying it knows it or not. The revisions that the person usually is so emphatically referring to are not revisions at all. It is rather dishonest to say otherwise. For a start, the Greek text and the Hebrew text that underlies the KJV was not and has never been changed. This has remained consistent and constant throughout the more than 400 years since the KJV was first translated way back in 1611 and the first printing carried out by the aforementioned Robert Barker. Unlike the modern versions where the underlying Greek text is constantly being changed, they are on the 28th edition of the Nestle-Aland text and the 5th edition of the United Bible Studies or the UBS text. However, it is true that there have been a number of updates to the KJV. The first of these was simply to change the type font from Gothic to Roman. No words were changed, just the ability to read those words were made a little bit easier. The other updates between 1611 and 1629 were simply printing error corrections. Printing errors most certainly did occur, and I'm pretty sure that nobody who is KJV only or a KJV advocate who themselves have studied this subject would make the claims to the contrary. Printing errors are exactly that. They are errors in printing. They are the errors in the printing of the KJV and not the wording of the KJV itself. These errors ranged from a single letter to words and, in fact, whole phrases being left out of the print. Again, these were all printing errors and not errors with the actual KJV text. One such printing error was simply a duplicated number 5 in 1 Corinthians 15:1, 5 and 6. The printer numbered the verses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 7. Now, the verses themselves are correct, the words, but obviously the second 5 should have been a 6. This was corrected and updated. This is not a mistake with the KJV. This is just a mistake in the printing of that KJV. Another such example is found in Psalm 69:32, where the printer put good instead of God. Psalm 69:32, your heart shall live that seek good. This is not an error in the KJV. This was a printing error that was corrected in 1617. The text of the KJV is God, but we have good in the printing. This is not an error in the text of the KJV itself. There are a number of cases where the word he or she, when the opposite should have been the correct reading, can be found. These were corrected. Two of the KJV translators themselves, Samuel Ward and John Boyce, corrected these printing errors, or rather what we would call typos. It must be pointed out that the spelling of many English words had not been finalized in 1611, and there were many words spelt quite differently than what would eventually become the finalized spelling in English. Examples of such spelling. Let's look at Genesis 21:12. If we have a look here, we can see that we have Lord with an E, we have said, S-A-Y-D-E, unto with a V rather than with a U. We have lad with double D there. We also have different spellings of different words. Notice also that we have the spelling said. It's spelled differently twice in this same verse. We have S-A-Y-D-E and we also have S-A-I-D-E. Like I said, the English spelling had not been formalized yet. This was an ongoing process. This was something that would later happen. This had nothing to do with the translation or the actual words themselves. Said means said. It's only the spelling that is different there. The fact is there is simply not one alteration to the actual underlying text of the KJV. There is nothing more than correction of the errors that occurred in the process of the printing and the spelling of words. So let's have a look at the Blainey revision. In 1769, Dr. Benjamin Blainey produced an edition of the KJV. Many people, those who do not know any better, James White included, love to point out that the 1769 Blainey version, there were many revisions, and they proclaimed that the KJV has indeed gone through literally thousands of changes. However, what they do not realize, probably because they have not bothered to actually check what these changes were, is that Blainey did not change the text of the KJV at all. The thousands of changes that he made were the updating of the spelling of the words that had now been finalized, and so he changed them to their finalized spelling. He changed said and said to the today's said, sin, S-I-N-N-E, to the now modern S-I-N, sin, days, D-A-Y-E-S, to days, D-A-Y-S, son, S-O-N-N-E, to son, S-O-N, and obviously any other words that needed to be updated, to be finalized with their spelling. He also edited some of the punctuation and removed the capitalization of some words like ark that he changed to without the capital A. Some words that were not previously italicized were put into italics. And that's it. Those are the thousands of changes that he made. He never changed the wording of the KJV. To claim otherwise is simply dishonest. So let's have a look at the Oxford versus Cambridge argument. Which one is correct? There are basically two printers of the KJV, the Oxford Press and the Cambridge Press. There are some people that will use this as an attack against the inerrancy of the KJV. Which version is correct, the Oxford or the Cambridge? This problem is rather less of a problem than those using the argument would like to make people think that there is. There are actually three differences between the two prints. They are found in Jeremiah 34:16, Nahum 3:16, and 2 Chronicles 33:19. So let's have a look at these three differences. Let's have a look at the Jeremiah 34:16. Now, I'll read it in the Oxford, and I'll point out the difference in the Cambridge. So, but ye turned and polluted my name, and caused every man his servant, and every man his handmaid, whom he had set at liberty at their pleasure to return, and brought them into subjection to be unto you for servants and for handmaids. Now, if we have a look at the Cambridge version, what we will see is that there is one difference in the word he and ye. If we go on manuscript evidence, the more correct reading based on the Hebrew is actually the Cambridge, ye. But even if we go with he, there is no real difference. He would be referring to the collective group as singular, speaking of each individual, whereas ye refers to each individual member as the collective group. There's no difference here. Let's have a look at 2 Chronicles 33:19. And again, I read it in the Oxford. His prayer also, and how God was entreated of him, and all his sins, and his trespass, and the places wherein he built high places, and set up groves and graven images. Before he was humbled, behold, they are written among the sayings of the seers. Now, if we have a look at the Cambridge version, we will notice that in the Oxford, it states sins, and in the Cambridge, it has the singular sin. Now, in the English, there is literally no difference between these two meanings, and I'll show you why. If we have a look, it is preceded by the word all. All here is inclusive. Sins is the plural of sin. All sin means all the sins. Both are actually correct renderings in the English because we have the word all here. If the word all wasn't there, then there would be a difference. But as the word all is there, I can say all sin and all sins, and they both encompass all of sins. And lastly, we'll have a look at the Nahum 3:16. Again, I'll read it in the Oxford. Thou hast multiplied thy merchants above the stars of heaven. The cankerworm spoileth and fleeth away. Now, in the Cambridge, we can see that it says flieth away. Now, a cankerworm does not fly, but in the context, a literal flying is not what is being inferred. It is actually taking flight, as in to flee. And that's exactly what this means. Here is the definition of flight by the Cambridge Dictionary. And we have one of those definitions is an act or example of escape, running away, or avoiding something. They lost all their possessions during their flight from the invading army. It simply means to flee. Flight and flee are synonyms in this meaning. They have the exact same meaning. And that's it, folks. That is the Oxford versus Cambridge argument. When we properly study the revision argument, there is no argument to be made. There has been no revisions of the KJV. The KJV that somebody holds today, the text that they hold today is the same text as what they would have held back in 1611. The spelling may be different, slight punctuation, but that's it. The KJV stands against this attack. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really does mean a lot. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe as well. There is a subscribe button in the corner. I look forward to seeing you on another video. Shalom.